Narcotics in Bolivia, South America, is a subject that primarily involves the coca crop, used in the production of the drug, cocaine. Trafficking and corruption have been two of the most prominent negative side effects of the illicit narcotics trade in Bolivia, and the country's government has engaged in negotiations with the United States (US) as a result of the industry's ramifications. Coca. Bolivia's most lucrative crop and economic activity in the 1980s was coca, whose leaves were processed clandestinely into cocaine. The country was the second largest grower of coca in the world, supplying approximately 15% of the U.S. cocaine market in the late 1980s. Analysts believe that exports of coca paste and cocaine generated between $600 million to $1 billion annually in the 1980s, depending on prices and output. Based on these estimates, coca-related exports equaled or surpassed the country's legal exports. Coca has been grown in Bolivia for centuries. The coca plant, a tea-like shrub, was cultivated mostly by small farmers in the Chapar and Yungas regions. About 65% of all Bolivian coca was grown in the Chapar region of Cochabamba department. Other significant coca growing areas consisted of the Yungas of La Paz department and various areas. Soaring unemployment also contributed to the boom. In addition, farmers turned to coca for its quick economic return, its light weight, its yield of 4 crops a year, and the abundance of United States dollars available in the trade, a valuable resource in a hyperinflated economy. The Bolivian government estimated that coca production had expanded from 1.63 million kilograms of leaves covering 4,100 hectares in 1977 to a minimum of 45 million kilograms over an area of at least 48,000 hectares in 1987. The number of growers expanded from 7,600 to at least 40,000 over the same period. Besides growers, the coca networks employed numerous Bolivians, including carriers, zepaadores, manufacturers of coca paste and cocaine, security personnel, and a large variety of other positions. The unparalleled revenues made the risk worthwhile for many. Government efforts to eradicate the expansion of coca cultivation in Bolivia began in 1983, when Bolivia committed itself to a 5-year program to reduce coca production and created the Coca Eradication Directorate, Dirección de la Reconversión de la Coca, DIRCO, under the Ministry of Agriculture, Campesino Affairs, and Livestock Affairs. Bolivia's National Directorate for the Control of Dangerous Substances, Dirección Nacional para el Control de Sustancias Peligrosas, DNCSP, was able to eradicate several thousand hectares of coca. These efforts put only a small dent in the coca industry and were highly controversial among thousands of peasants. Under the joint agreement signed by the United States and Bolivia in 1987, which created the DNCSP, Bolivia allocated $72.2 million for the 1988 to 1991 period to eradication programs, including the wide-ranging Rural Development Program for the Chapar region. The program was aided by an 88% drop in the local price of coca caused by the fall in cocaine prices in the United States. The economics of eradication were particularly frustrating. As more coca was destroyed, the local price increased, making it more attractive to other growers. Bolivia, however, was seeking additional funds from the United States and Western Europe to proceed with an eradication plan that was supposed to provide peasants $2,000 per hectare eradicated. With the 1988 passage of Law 1008, coca growing became technically illegal outside a specially mandated 12,000 hectare area in the Yungas. A 4-year government eradication campaign begun in 1989 sought to convert 55% of coca areas into legal crops. Coffee and citrus fruits were offered as alternative crops to coca despite the fact that their return was a fraction of that of coca. These crops were also harder to sell and transport. Coca has a much longer shelf life than that of fruit crops, which require rapid transportation. The cocaine industry had a generally deleterious effect on the Bolivian economy. The cocaine trade greatly accelerated the predominance of the United States dollar in the economy and the large black market for currency, thereby helping to fuel inflation in the 1980s. The escalation of coca cultivation also damaged the output of fruits and coffee, which were mostly destined for local consumption. Coca's high prices, besides being generally inflationary, also distorted other sectors, especially labor markets. Manufacturers in the Cochabamba area during the 1980s found it impossible to match the wages workers could gain in coca, making their supply of labor unreliable and thus hurting the formal economy. Narcotics trafficking. By the late 1980s, Bolivians had become increasingly aware of the serious threat to their society posed by drug traffickers. One Bolivian editorial identified several dimensions of that threat: the existence of hundreds of clandestine airstrips in eastern Bolivia, flights of unidentified aircraft in Bolivian airspace, the presence of armed criminal groups, the disappearance of, and trafficking in, Bolivian passports, the intervention of officials of foreign governments in Bolivia's affairs, the acceptance of foreign troops on Bolivian territory, corruption within the national security agencies and courts of justice, the growing control of mass media by narcotics traffickers, the spread of drug abuse among Bolivian youth, and the increased links between traffickers and guerrilla groups. Narcotourism. An unwanted byproduct of Bolivia's cocaine industry was the importation of Colombian-style drug violence. In the late 1980s, Colombia's Medellin cartel reportedly wielded considerable power in Bolivia, setting prices for coca paste and cocaine and terrorizing the drug underworld with hired assassins. Furthermore, drug barons, organized into families, had established their own fiefdoms in Cochabamba, Bini, and Santa Cruz departments, using bribes and assassinations to destroy local authority. In September 1986, 3 members of a Bolivian scientific team were slain in the Huancaca National Park in Santa Cruz department shortly after their aircraft landed beside a clandestine coca paste factory. The murders led to the discovery of the country's largest cocaine processing installation, as well as evidence of an extensive international drug trafficking organization consisting mostly of Colombians and Brazilians. President Paz Estenssoro fired the Bolivian police commander and deputy commander as a result of their alleged involvement. In a related action, suspected traffickers in Santa Cruz murdered an opposition deputy who was a member of the congressional commission that investigated the Huancaca case. In the late 1980s, there were several incidents of narcotourism against the United States presence, the judiciary, and anti-drug agents. For example, the so-called Alejo Calatayud terrorist command claimed responsibility for a May 1987 bomb attack against the Cochabamba home of a DEA agent. The Supreme Court of Justice, seated in Sucre, requested and received military police protection in mid-1986. The Explosives Brigade successfully removed a live briefcase bomb from the Senate Library in August 1987. The so-called Santa Cruz cartel, allegedly linked to the Medellin cartel in Colombia, claimed responsibility for the machine gun murders of 2 members of the Special Anti-Narcotics Force in Santa Cruz in March 1988. Bolivians were also concerned about the increasing brazenness of Bolivia's drug traffickers, as demonstrated in August 1988 by a low-power dynamite attack on Secretary of State George P. Shultz's car caravan as it headed to La Paz's Kennedy International Airport. The so-called Simon Bolivar Group and the Pablo Zarate Wilca National Indigenous Force, Fuerza Indigenista Pablo Zarate Wilca, FIPZW, claimed responsibility. Narcotics corruption. Drug-related corruption reportedly began to take a firm hold within Bolivia's military and security services under General Banzer's rule, 1971-78. The Garcia Meza regime, 1980-81, however, was one of Bolivia's most flagrant examples of narcotics corruption. Garcia Meza's so-called cocaine coup was itself generally believed to have been financed by the cocaine mafia, which bribed certain military officers. Garcia Meza reportedly ruled with an inner cabinet of leading civilians and military officers involved in the cocaine trade. 2 of his ministers, Colonel Ariel Coca and Colonel Luis Arce Gomez were well-known godfathers of the industry. By 1982, approximately 4,500 prosecutions were underway in connection with the embezzlement of state funds by civil servants, said to amount to a total of $100 million. In early 1986, Congress charged Garcia Meza and 55 of his former colleagues with sedition, armed uprising, treason, genocide, murder, torture, fraud against the state, drug trafficking, crimes against the Constitution, and other crimes. In April 1986, however, the Supreme Court of Justice suspended the first hearing in Garcia Meza's murder trial, after his defense demanded the removal of 3 judges whom it charged had participated in Garcia Meza's military government. The Supreme Court of Justice subsequently voted to remove its president and 2 other justices from the trial. After Garcia Meza escaped from custody, he had been living under house arrest in Sucre and reportedly fled the country in early 1989. The Supreme Court of Justice vowed to try him and 2 accomplices in absentia. Governmental and military police corruption under the Paz Estenssoro government, 1985-89, was less flagrant than in the 1980-82 period of military rule. Nevertheless, it reportedly remained widespread. In December 1988, Bolivia's foreign minister asserted that narcotics traffickers were attempting to corrupt the political process. Bolivians were outraged, for example, by secretly taped narco videos made in 1985 by Roberto Suarez Gomez, known as the King of Cocaine in Bolivia until the mid-1980s, and aired on national television in May 1988. The tapes, provided by a former naval captain cashiered for alleged corruption, showed 2 prominent politicians from Banzer's Nationalist Democratic Action, Acción Democrático Nacionalista, ADN, and military figures fraternizing with Suarez. The UMAPAR in particular had earned a reputation for corruption, especially in the Chapar region. In 1987, according to Department of State and congressional staff, drug traffickers were offering UMAPAR officers and town officials in the Chapar region amounts ranging from $15,000 to $25,000 for 72 hours of protection in order to allow aircraft to load and take off from clandestine airstrips. In February 1988, the Deputy Minister of National Defense announced that about 90% of UMAPAR members, including 12 middle and high-ranking officers, had been dismissed for alleged links to drug trafficking. The La Paz newspaper Presencia reported in March 1988 that UMAPAR chiefs, including the prosecutors, were working with narcotics traffickers by returning to them the large drug fines and turning only the small ones into the authorities. Observers considered UMAPAR forces in Santa Cruz to be more honest and dedicated. In October 1988, the Undersecretary of the Social Defense Secretariat reiterated that drug traffickers had obtained the protection of important sectors of influence in Bolivia, including some military members and ordinary judges. He cited the example of Cochabamba's 7th Division commander and 4 of his top officers, who were discharged dishonorably after they were found to be protecting a clandestine Chapar airstrip used by drug smugglers. The ministry official also announced that the Navy was protecting drug trafficking activities in the Puerto Villarroel area of the Chapar. For that reason, the United States suspended assistance to the Navy temporarily in late 1988 until its commander was replaced. In December 1989, Bolivia's anti-drug police captured no less a drug trafficker than Arce Gomez, who was subsequently extradited to the United States. Impact of narcotics trafficking in the late 1980s, there continued to be concern about an overburdened and allegedly corrupt judicial system. According to the Department of State's country reports on human rights practices for 1988 and Bolivian press reports, judges were implicated in drug-related corruption. Narcotics traffickers routinely tried to bribe judicial and other officials in exchange for releasing suspected smugglers, returning captured drugs, and purging incriminating files. In 1988, the Senate's Constitution and Justice Committee ordered the suspension of 13 judges of the La Paz, Cochabamba, and Santa Cruz Superior District Courts of Justice for wrongdoing in drug trafficking cases. The Supreme Court of Justice insisted, however, on its prerogative to try the judges first. After doing so, it ordered the suspension of several of the accused judges and continued to investigate others. Relatively few prosecutions or forfeitures of traffickers' assets took place. A lack of judicial investigatory power hampered the investigation of the bank accounts and the origin of wealth of people suspected of trafficking in drugs. Although 13 of the big bosses reportedly had been identified by early 1988, arrests of drug kingpins were infrequently reported because of lack of evidence. In ruling on the 1986 Juan Cocker case involving the slaying of a leading Bolivian scientist, his pilot, and a guide, the Third Criminal Court of Santa Cruz returned a guilty verdict in April 1988 against 10 Brazilians and a Colombian, in addition to a Bolivian thought to be dead. The court, however, dismissed charges against 5 other Bolivian suspects, including several well-known drug traffickers. The freeing of 2 of the suspects by the Santa Cruz judges prompted the Supreme Court of Justice to demand the resignations of the entire Santa Cruz judiciary because of its leniency toward drug traffickers. 4 Santa Cruz judges were dismissed because of irregularities in the Juan Cocker case, which in early 1989 remained at an impasse, under advisement in the Supreme Court of Justice. Under the 1988 anti-narcotics law, the judicial police must report anti-narcotics operations to the closest special anti-narcotics force district within 48 hours. The law also called for the creation of 3-judge special narcotics control courts or tribunals, juzgados especiales de narcotráfico, with broad responsibilities. In early 1989, the Supreme Court of Justice began appointing judges and lawyers to serve on the new tribunals, 2 of which began functioning as tribunals of first instance in narcotics-related cases, with jurisdiction for the judicial districts of La Paz, Cochabamba, Santa Cruz, and Beni. A total of 13 special narcotics control courts were supposed to be operating by mid-1989, with 2 in each of the districts of La Paz, Cochabamba, Santa Cruz, and Beni, and only 1 responsible for the 5 remaining departments. Their judges, adjunct prosecutors, and support staff were to receive higher salaries than other judicial officials. However, the Paz Zamora government reportedly planned to disband these courts. Bilateral and legislative anti-narcotics measures source, based on information from United States Agency for International Development, a review of AIDS Narcotics Control Development Assistance Program, Washington, 1986, E2. In February 1987, Bolivia and the United States signed a broad outline of an agreement on a 3-year, $300 million joint plan aimed at eradicating 70% of Bolivia's known coca fields. The new program included a 1-year voluntary eradication phase and a program in which coca growers would be paid $350 in labor costs and $1,650 in longer-term development assistance for each hectare of coca destroyed. According to the Department of State's Bureau of International Narcotics Matters, Bolivia exceeded the voluntary coca reduction target for the September 1987 to August 1988 period, destroying 2,000 hectares, or 200 more than required. To implement the 1987 agreement, the Paz Estancero government revamped the anti-drug bureaucracy that had been established incongruously in 1981 during the Garcia Meza regime. The National Council Against the Unlawful Use and Illicit Trafficking of Drugs, Consejo Nacional contra el Uso Indebido y Tráfico Ilícito de Drogas, CONALID, presided over by the foreign minister, was charged with drawing up rules and regulations and creating new anti-drug trafficking measures. 2 new secretariats were formed under CONALID. The Social Defense Subsecretariat, Subsecretariat de Defensa Social, was made subordinate to the Ministry of Interior, Migration, and Justice and charged with interdiction. It also centralized all the activities of the National Directorate for the Control of Dangerous Substances, Dirección Nacional para el Control de Sustancias Peligrosas, DNCSP, and of the UMOPAR, the Subsecretariat of Alternative Development and Substitution of Coca Cultivation, Subsecretariat de Desarrollo Alternativo y Sustitución de Cultivos de Coca, and its Coca Eradication Directorate, Dirección de la Reconversión de la Coca, DARCO, were charged with drawing up overall rural development plans for the areas affected by the substitution of the coca plantations. On July 19, 1988, to qualify for United States aid, Paz Estenssoro signed the Law of Regulations for Coca and Controlled Substances, Ley del Régimen de la Coca y Sustancias Controladas, hereafter, the 1988 Anti-Narcotics Law. One of the strictest anti-narcotics laws in Latin America, it aimed at eradicating illicit coca production and penalizing trafficking in drugs. As enacted by presidential decree in December 1988, the new law provided for a 10,000-hectare zone of legal coca cultivation in the Yungas region of La Paz Department and a small section of Cochabamba Department to meet traditional demand, down from a previous total of 80,000 hectares for the Yungas and Chapar regions, see Fig. 16. It also provided for a transitional zone of excess production in the Chapar region subject to annual reduction benchmarks of 5,000 to 8,000 hectares and provided for an illegal zone, comprising all territory outside the traditional and transitional areas, in which coca cultivation was prohibited. The law prohibited the use of chemicals or herbicides for the eradication of coca, established that some 48,000 hectares of coca plantations would be eradicated over a 5-year period, and set up a special judicial mechanism to deal with illegal drug trafficking. Under the 1988 Anti-Narcotics Law, drug traffickers could be sentenced to prison for anywhere between 5 and 25 years. Manufacturers of controlled substances, 5 to 15 years. Sowers and harvesters of illicit coca fields, 2 to 4 years. Transporters, 8 to 12 years. And pisadores, coca stompers, 1 to 2 years. Minors under the age of 16 who were found guilty of drug-related crimes would be sent to special centers until they were completely rehabilitated. Shortly before the new law went into effect, a United States General Accounting Office report criticized Bolivia's methods of fighting drug trafficking. The study, whose undocumented generalizations about corruption reportedly irked Bolivian government officials, put the primary blame for the slow progress against drug trafficking on rampant corruption in Bolivia and the unwillingness or inability of the government of Bolivia to introduce and implement effective coca control and enforcement measures. In rejecting the report, the Minister of Interior, Migration, and Justice noted in November 1988 that, in addition to arresting more than 1,000 individuals on drug charges, Bolivia had eradicated some 2,750 hectares of coca plantations, seized 22,500 kilograms of cocaine, and destroyed over 2,000 cocaine factories. Bolivian officials also asserted that more than 1,660 anti-drug operations during 1988 had resulted in the destruction of from 1,000 to 1,400 clandestine cocaine factories and laboratories, 80% of them in Cochabamba and Santa Cruz departments, the confiscation of about 10,000 kilograms of cocaine, and the arrest of some 700 individuals. The Minister of Planning and Coordination stated in December that 2,900 hectares of coca crops had been eradicated under the Financial Compensation Program. Bolivia's anti-narcotics units apprehended several prominent traffickers in 1988. At the same time that the 1988 anti-narcotics law was promulgated, the UMAPAR arrested Suarez at his hacienda in Beni Department. According to one theory, Suarez allowed himself to be arrested in a bid to avoid extradition to the United States. See the criminal justice system, the CH. In October 1988, the Special Anti-Narcotics Forces captured an alleged drug godfather, Mario Arauz Morales, El Chichin, by chance during a training exercise in a jungle area. In November, anti-drug police in the Chapar also arrested Rosa Flores de Cabrera, alias Rosa Romero de Humaras, La Chola Rosa, described as one of the most wanted women in the Bolivian drug trafficking network, with connections to the Medellin cartel. Under the government of Jaime Paz Zamora, 1989, anti-drug institutions were restructured, but CONALID remained the regulatory body. CONALID directed the Permanent Executive Coordination and Operations Council, Consejo Permanente de Coordinación Ejecutiva y Operativa, COPCO. Like CONALID, COPCO was headed by the Foreign Minister, and its membership also included the Ministers of Interior, Migration, and Justice, Planning and Coordination, Social Services and Public Health, Agriculture, Campesino Affairs, and Livestock Affairs, Education and Culture, National Defense, and Finance. A new National Executive Directorate, Directorio Ejecutivo Nacional, DEN, was to support COPCO's plans and program dealing with alternative development, drug prevention, and coca crop eradication. Evo Morales, former president of Bolivia. Evo Morales is also titular president of Bolivia's Cocalero movement, a loose federation of coca growers' unions, made up of campesinos who are resisting the efforts of the United States government to eradicate coca in the province of Chapar in central Bolivia. However, President Morales appeared to have some success in counter-narcotics efforts. Seizures of coca paste and cocaine and destruction of drug laboratories had steadily increased since President Morales took office, and coca cultivation was down 13% in 2011 alone. Analysts such as Catherine Leideber and Khalida Youngers indicate that these successes had emerged from effective coca monitoring, increased economic development, and social control. Such improvements in Bolivia's narcotics situation had reportedly drawn attention and led to a slight diplomatic thaw with the United States. The two countries are expected to swap ambassadors. See also UMOPAR, illegal drug trade in Bolivia. References. This article incorporates public domain material from the Library of Congress Country Studies website, http://lcweb2.loc.gov/frd/cs/. Where in the world did someone research that coca production is down in Bolivia under Evo Morales?